In this video, I think I'm going to make a yo-yo for the very first time on the wood lathe. Let's see what happens. This is a project that I wanted to turn for a while now. And in all my years of wood turning, I've never yet turned a yo-yo. So it's something I'm pretty excited about. And I've watched lots of videos and there's lots of different ways to turn a yo-yo, but today we're going to try and turn a one-piece yo-yo out of this block of wood right here. Now this is a piece of Pacific Madrone, and it's a species of wood that grows on the west coast like Washington, Oregon, California. This particular piece came from Washington, and it came from my father-in-law's property, and it has a special meaning to me because this is from the property where my wife grew up, so that's pretty cool. And so this one's going to be for me, and so hopefully it works. As many of you know, I really like to make toys and I like to play with them, so this will be a really fun project. And yeah, let's get to it. Oh, by the way, I'm Jason Geyser and you're watching Geyser Woodturner, so let's make a one-piece yo-yo. So you'll notice that this piece is already prepared for mounting into the chuck, and if you don't know how to do that, I have other videos where you can learn how to do this yourself. So I'm just going to mount it into the chuck, tighten that up, and whenever you remount something into a chuck after you've had it between centers, it's never perfectly round again. So we'll bring up the tailstock before we start just for extra support, and then I'm going to rough it until it's completely round. So I'll give it a little spin, make sure it all clears, and then we'll turn on the lathe, get out the spindle roughing gouge, and I'm just going to lightly go over it until that piece is round one more time. So I'll just rest the bevel on the piece of wood and raise the handle slightly till I get a cut. Then I'm going to go back and forth, keeping that same angle until I get the piece nice and round. And this blank is about 3 inches around, and I think that's a little bit too much for a yo-yo, so I'm going to go down even a little bit more and change that diameter till I'm about 2.5 inches. So I'll get out a set of calipers and just put it on my ruler until I'm about 2.5 inches. And that'll give me a gauge of where to stop at when I have a diameter that will work for my yo-yo. At this point I'm going to keep removing material and just keep using the spindle roughing gouge to do that until I'm down close to where I want to be. So I'm going to stop the lathe and check and make sure I'm close, and I'm getting there. So we'll just remove a little bit more. And then we'll stop and check one more time and see how we're doing. And that looks pretty good. So at this point I'm going to start adding some lines. The first line is just going to mark where there's going to be some waste material to get rid of that little dot that the center leaves. And then I'm going to mark this out for one side, and I'll measure it, and wow, it's right at 3/4 of an inch. So that's pretty cool. My carpenter eye must be working. And then I'm going to mark out where I want the string to go in the center. I'm just going to give it a 1/4 inch, and then I'll go another 3/4 of an inch on the other side of that. And we'll go ahead and turn the lathe on and then rub the pencil on it, and I have all my lines. This is the layout for my yo-yo. That's all that I'll need. So now I need to remove some wood from the middle here, and I'm going to mark that out where I'm going to do that just by rubbing the pencil across. And I think in yo-yo terms this is called the axle or the bearing. I'm going to cut it down to about 1/4 of an inch, 5/16, something like that, and grain direction is very important. So I want the grain to be running across the piece of wood so that it's the strongest that it can be. So now I'm going to grab my 3/8 spindle gouge to start doing some shaping and removing some waste material on the end here. So I'll position the tool rest, and then once the lathe is on, I'm going to ride the bevel here and then start turning away some of this waste that I don't need where that line is, and then I'll come down the end grain and cut that off. And if I'm not careful, oops, see See, everyone gets a catch every once in a while. You have to present the tool correctly to the piece of wood, or it wants to skate and turn on you like that. So I'm just going to remove that little mistake. Good thing it was on the corner and I did it early, because it's not going to affect the shape at all. Now I just want to gently curve this around a little at a time. Remember, this is the shape that you're going to have to stick with when you get to the other side, so make it as nice as you can. So we'll bring that around until I'm satisfied with it, and then we're going to remove the tailstock and get rid of this little mark that the live center's made. Let's rotate the tool rest around and get it in a nice position. Then what we're going to do is just take some light cuts across here and remove this little nub. It'll take about 4 or 5 passes. There we go. And now I just want to refine the rest of that shape. We'll make sure that that's looks good to us. And then I'll come in for one last final pass across here and take a really light shearing cut and just clean up all that end grain, and just take your time and go slowly all the way down and just let the tool do the work. And you should get a really nice shiny surface that'll be great to almost finish from there. That looks pretty good. Okay, now that I have that where I want it, we're going to start taking some material out of the middle where the axle or bearing will be. Now I'm not going to go all the way down. I'm just going to take a narrow parting tool and remove some of the material to leave it as stable as possible for while I'm shaping it, so it's not vibrating all over the place. So I'll just take a pass and cut down, take a pass and cut down until I've removed all the material the width that I want it to be where I've marked it out. So I'll get down there as far as I can. I'll start shaping the inside of the yo-yo and just kind of refining that shape, and then I can start working on the other side and getting it to where I want. And then I can remove some material on the outside just to get it out of the way so that I can get my spindle gouge in there and just start shaping it so it's the same as the other side. Now one thing you'll want to do is just kind of stop and look at it sometimes and just ask yourself, does this match the other side? You want to go slowly so that you can have time to think about it, and you really can't ever put material back onto the piece of wood. So it's always best to look at it and just see how it's going. Does this look symmetrical? And what do I need to do to make it look just a little bit better? Okay, so I'm getting down pretty close to where I think this is fairly symmetrical where it's going to be, and I think it'll be okay. Okay, so I'm just going to check and make sure it fits my hand. It feels pretty good. And then I'm going to show the sanding part this time because I have a lot of questions about how to sand and what to start with and things like that. And I'm starting with a 120 grit. If you have to start with anything less than like an 80 grit, so like if you're doing a 60 grit, that's pretty rough, and you're going to put some really deep scratches into the piece of wood that are almost impossible to remove later. So, you know, if you're starting around 80 or 120 and it still looks smooth, then you're doing pretty good. And if not, then you need to work on the cuts that you have with your tools. Make sure that your tool work is as good as it can be. Okay, so we'll do the 120 grit, and then on this one I'm just going to go to a 180 grit. I don't think it really needs to be something like 400 or 600 and like super shiny, because I want to be able to grip it. It's going to be in use in my hand. So, and really when you're doing this, you'll do all the work with the heaviest grit and get it all smoothed out the best you can. And then when you go to use your next grit up, then it's basically just going over the surface and removing all the scratches that the first grit that you used put in there. One thing I like to do when I'm all done is just grab some shavings off the lathe and just kind of burnish it. And all that really does is lay down the fibers of the wood and shine it up a little bit. It's not necessary, of course, and you don't want to do it too hard or you can burn the wood. So now we want to continue down in the center and remove wood to create the axle or bearing of our yo-yo. And so I'll just take a pass at a time and go down a little ways and then come over and go down a little ways and go back and forth until I work my way till I'm about 5/16 to 1/4 inch in the center. And we really don't have to sand this at all. It's something that we want to even leave a little bit rough so that the string can have something to grab onto. It just has to be smooth enough that the string can rotate on so that the yo-yo will sleep if we want it to get to the bottom and continue to rotate before we pull it back up. Alright, so I think that I'm about there, and that's really all that I'll have to do is just keep working my way down, and there we have it. Now I just want to remove some waste material. I'll get out that narrow parting tool and just come down a little ways, and I want to make it so that I can get in there and bring the left side of this down just a little bit farther so that I don't have to do a lot of work on it later. And so I'm just going to bring my tool in and make some really light cuts and refine that shape so that it's as close as I can be before I take it off of the lathe. And so we'll do some really light passes, and then I'll bring the parting tool out and we'll go down just a little bit farther. We'll remove some more waste material, and then with my thumb I'm just kind of supporting the gouge and taking a really light cut and holding my hand on the yo-yo to support it so that it won't vibrate too much. And then I'll get it down really close. I don't want it to come all the way off. What I really want to do is get out a saw and just a couple of cuts, just one pull, two pulls, it should be off of there. Okay, and there's not a whole lot to clean up there on the other end. And one of the ways that I've used to mount it back in the lathe to work on that other end is I use a piece of leather, and that's just so it doesn't make any marks in there. And this will work if your jaws come out far enough to grab the piece of wood, or if they open far enough. So you may or may not be able to do this. You can always do a little bit of hand sanding to take care of this, but I just like to use leather and clean it up on the lathe if I can, because it looks so much better if you can do it on the lathe. So I'm just going to make sure that leather stays on there. We'll just wrap it around and put a little piece of blue tape on there, and all this is really doing is just holding it in place until I get it in the chuck. Alright, so I'll go ahead and get that into the chuck, and then I want to lightly tighten the chuck down until it starts to grab, and then do a little bit more. And I don't really need to put a whole lot of pressure on this because I'm not going to put any pressure on it while I'm cutting. So just get it far enough that it's going to hold it, but not far enough that it's going to grab and those teeth will dig into the piece of wood. That's what the leather's there for, is so that it can dig into the leather a little bit. So I'll set up my tool rest, and I'm going to want to make my cuts towards the headstock so that I'm not putting any side pressure on it. And if I do put any side pressure on it, I want to go really lightly and really slowly. And I got it in there pretty true the first time, which is kind of amazing. And we'll go ahead and just make some light cuts to clean up this material that was left on there from before when we parted it off. And like I said, just cut towards the headstock, pushing towards the headstock. And we'll come out, and once that is cleaned up, I've got to decide if I want to turn the tool around and make some light cuts towards the center. Now there's a possibility that if I take anything too big, the pressure will pop that right out of the chuck and send it at me, but I'm wearing a face shield, so I'm not too concerned about that. It's a really small piece of wood, so it shouldn't have a problem, but if I make light cuts and take them down a little at a time to finish off this piece, I should be okay. So maybe one more pass here. Rest the bevel on the piece of wood and maybe open the flute up just a little bit, and then take a really light cut and just take it really slow all the way down. And there will be some vibration because you're really only turning on that 1/4 inch dowel in the center of your yo-yo. And so get it the best you can, and then you can clean the rest up with sandpaper. So we'll start with our 120 grit, and we don't want to push too hard on this, just hard enough to remove any of the tool marks that we've left in there, any of the vibration tool marks. And like I said, don't push too hard, you might pop it out of there, or you might break the 1/4 inch axle that's in the middle. We'll go to our 180 grit. Just lightly go over the surface. And what's good about doing it on the lathe is you just get this really nice surface on both sides. And if you can figure out how to grab a piece on both sides, then it looks way more finished when you're all done, rather than trying to hand sand it, which takes a long time and doesn't quite give you the same look like it's been turned on the lathe. And we're going to burnish it just a little bit, and then the turning part of our yo-yo will be done. Let's just pop that yo-yo out and see what it looks like. So I got it pretty symmetrical on both sides, and it's nice and smooth, so we're ready to oil it. So I'm just going to put some walnut oil on a paper towel, and then I'm just going to rub that into the outside of the yo-yo. I don't really want to get it down in that groove where the string's going to ride, but we just want to make it nice and shiny and look pretty and protect it. Now that that's done, we're going to actually need something to make this yo-yo work. And I don't have a commercial yo-yo string sitting around, but I do have this cotton twine that I got at the hardware store, and so I'm going to make my string out of that. Now this one is 3 strands, so I'm going to have to separate those. I guess I'll get 3 strings out of it. So I measured it out and looked it up online, and I needed a strand that was 40 inches long. So I'll go ahead and measure out 20 inches at a time. We'll do that once, and we'll do it one more time, and then I'll just double it back on itself, and then I'll be able to cut it off, and I'll have 40 inches. And you can look up how long a string needs to be for you, but I'm going to have to separate these strands now, and that's really was the hard part of making this whole string, is just pulling that strand apart and doing it little by little. So I just found that if I grab the strand and then twist and untwist, and then grab the strand and then untwist, then it went fairly well. And I just really want to separate one of the strands because I only need one string for the yo-yo right now. So just keep going, and every once in a while it would kind of double back on itself and twist back up. So, you know, it was frustrating and took some time, but beats running to the store again. Okay, and this just takes a long time. When I finally get it separated, throw that other part aside, and then what you want to do is you want to double it back on itself, put the 2 ends together, and then you're going to bring it all the way to the other end and start with a loop down there, and then you're just going to want to retwist this string. And again, this takes some more time. You don't have to do it all the way because the yo-yo is going to kind of do it itself as you use the yo-yo, if you turn your hand over while you're using the yo-yo. So we'll just kind of retwist it, and then we'll just need to tie a loop on the end, and that's just for my finger to go into. So we'll get that nice and tight, and then you can double back the string through it and then put it onto your finger. Now there's a couple of different ways you can wrap the string onto the yo-yo. You can just put that single loop over the axle and twist it up, which is the way you generally do it, or you can grab one strand and wrap it around one more time. I'm going to try it the single strand way first. Now this string's just a little bit loose, so I'm going to wind it up by spinning the yo-yo and just kind of get it to hold a little bit tighter if I can. And then we'll put that string on my finger, and then we'll wind it up and take it outside and see what we can do with it. Here's the yo-yo on its maiden voyage, and nothing. Just goes to the bottom and spins. So what I'm going to do is just wind it up again really quick, get that string tight, and then we'll wind it up a little bit tighter this time and see if that'll make a difference in what we do. There we go. We've got something. Came back up, and now I can't get it to go anywhere. So we're going to try it one more time. Wind up a little tighter. There we go. I got it working. So it still sleeps a little bit much when I don't want it to. So I went ahead and wrapped it one more time, and now it's really responsive and it'll come up every time, and I have a hard time getting it to sleep. But it works. Alright, so I got it done and it works, and I'm pretty excited about it. So I got this really cool yo-yo now, and the things I notice about it is that it's a little bit heavy, so maybe next time I'll use a lighter wood or make it a little bit smaller. But it's working. I'm having a little bit of problems with the string. When I wrap it once around, just like you would a normal yo-yo, it just wants to go down and sleep, and I have a hard time getting it back up. And then when I wrap it twice around, it's really responsive and wants to come up, and I can get it to sleep every once in a while. But so it's kind of like in between. So if anyone has any tips for me on the string, maybe I just need to buy a commercial string for it instead of make my own. But yeah, give me some tips if you got them. But you guys have a good day, and we'll see you soon.